I'm Pastor James. Good morning. So we're working for several weeks. We're working on this thing called living the dream. And we're not just talking about any old dream, we all have dreams of all kinds of things we want, things we like, things we daydream about. But what we're talking about is the idea of having a God dream. A confidence that there is a calling on your life at some point to do a certain thing or to become a certain thing or to be like a certain thing. You may not be able to pinpoint exactly what that is. You may not even feel like you have a particular sense of calling, but I'm telling you, you should pay attention to this, because if at some point you do, some of the lessons that are learned in these passages are going to come into play, whether you want to cooperate with them or not. So it would be better if God has wisdom for you to get about following your calling, following this dream, that you would have the wisdom and have some more insight so that when opportunity knocks, you're ready to answer the door. And you're not kicking yourself later for letting it go by or messing up or some other thing, And so you may have something you believe has been called to you to do by God. And if you do, this is for you. Like I said, you may not have a super specific picture, but you just have a sense there's something, and maybe the definition has not fully arrived yet, but it's there. And so these next several weeks, we're going to walk through the story of a man named Joseph, a very old man, and very dead man, named Joseph, pre-Jesus by far. This is not Jesus' dad, Joseph. This is way Old Testament Joseph. And so Joseph himself has lots of advantages. He's born into a family, and dad's a good rancher, a good farmer, a good shepherd, and he's well-to-do. Joseph has 11 brothers, and they don't like him much. And he's the youngest. So, there you go. But Joseph gets a picture from God that someday he's going to be the one responsible for his entire family's well-being. It's an important enough thing that God actually gives it to him in a vision with kind of metaphorical symbols, and he runs off and tells them all. And then just to clarify it, he gets a totally different vision, but with all the same meaning. So it's like boom, boom, you can't deny it. Both come out to the same result. You are going to become responsible for your entire family's well-being, even though you're the youngest, even though everybody hates you, even though. So why do we care about that? Here's the thing, because like with Joseph, there can be an awful lot of time between the now and the completion of the dream. And that time leaves space to question, to make errors in judgment, to doubt, to wait patiently. A lot of people get anxious and lose focus in that time. And that's where things start to get funky, when we start to doubt, when we start to think about other things, when we start to just, maybe it was just bad pizza, and we sort of let that go. That's where things get funky. And this account has a lot to show us about how God uses circumstances to shape the dream, even though circumstances may not be what you would choose to fulfill the dream. So if you're reading with us, you read chapter 37 last week. I talked about it, and then you read it. Now, if you didn't read it, go back and read it. Don't read it right now, though. All right? And we're actually going to fast forward, jump right into chapter 39. Now, you're thinking, wait a minute, you did 37, 39. What's up with that? What about chapter 38? Well, here's the thing. Chapter 38 is kind of an interesting little side note to the story of Joseph. So it kind of jumps over to Joseph's brother. And you're like, well, wait a minute, you can't just skip that. There's something to be learned there. Well, I'm going to sum it up for you, okay? Here's what you do, chapter 38, okay? Don't sleep with prostitutes, strangers, or your in-laws, all right? That's the whole thing, all right? And you're like, wait, what? Well, now you're going to go back and read it, aren't you? So, yeah, all right. So, chapter 39, we pick back up with Joseph. All right. No, seriously, what we're going to look at today is what to do when things are not lining up. What do you do when things aren't lining up? You have this grand idea, you believe, I'm supposed to do something with this or something with these kinds of people, help these guys out, I'm supposed to become this kind of a person, and your life just is not going that direction. No matter how much you try, stuff just is, just not shaping up. So when we pick up with Joseph, he's been taken out of the countryside and sold to somebody high up in the Egyptian government. His brothers were going to kill him, thought better of it, and decided to just sell him to passing slave traders. Isn't that nice? So he ends up in the household of this man named Potiphar, who's a high up in the Pharaoh's own government. And people who did well back then do the same things that people who do well do now, okay? They acquire lots and lots of stuff, and they acquire resources, and they try and expand on those resources and get as much stuff as they can and still set themselves up to be able to get even more stuff in the future. So Potiphar has this household with all these slaves and people working in it and resources and lots of nice stuff, and he's got a wife, and he's got, just people everywhere. And Joseph is brought in there to get to work. And as you may have read, if you read ahead, the Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his personal attendant. He becomes this guy's right-hand man, his executive assistant, secretary, assistant to the regional manager, whatever you want to call it, but he is the guy, and he's put in charge of all kinds of things. It says Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything that he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So he left in Joseph's care everything that he had. With Joseph in charge, he didn't concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Wow. So Joseph gets shipped off against his will to become a slave, probably not anything that he would have chosen, right? And we know of Joseph that he was a diligent, hard worker. He was a sharp guy. He had integrity. Maybe not the best wisdom when it came to what he would share and what not to share and who and when to share it with, but he's 17, so cut him a break. And it's recognized just about as soon as he enters the household. This is a sharp customer. We could give this guy more to do. More to do. That's a side note to some of you. Be careful of what you let people know that you can do until you figure out whether or not he doesn't have a choice. So, here's Joseph. And here's how I would sum it up. Joseph's in an unfavorable position, surrounded by signs of God's favor. Think about that twice. There is nothing that you or I or Joseph would have picked to fulfill the dream. Why in the world? Nobody would pick that. Oh, I think I'll become a slave. I'll sell myself to be a slave. That's how we'll get the dream done. No. A completely unfavorable position. And yet, he's surrounded by all these signs that God is very much with him and intends to do something. He doesn't know what, but he's got all these gifts, and he's just being obedient to use them. And when he's obedient to use them, all this wild stuff starts to come together. He's in charge of an entire rich guy's household. They don't bother him. They just let him be. He's got freedom to roam around and do things. They trust him. He's in charge of vast amounts of wealth, and he's looked up to, even though he's a slave. Everybody respects him and trusts him. I mean, this is not the norm for being a slave. I'm just going to be up front with you. This is very unusual. What are you supposed to think in that moment? I mean, if you have a calling in your life and you believe you're headed for it, and then all of a sudden life just boom, bombs the thing, and nothing seems to be going right, and then in the middle of that, you see these strange signs that God is very much with you, and He's putting His favor on the things that you're doing. What are you supposed to make of that? Well, we're going to get a little insight into Joseph's headspace because of what comes next. So here we have this young man, this very hard worker, very diligent, very likable, okay? And he's a natural at being in charge. He's got the confidence to do whatever it is that's in front of him. And to top all that off, the Bible tells us that he was muscular and good looking. Says that. Says he was well built and handsome. Doesn't hurt, does it, ladies, right? So in Genesis 39:6, quote, after a while, his master's wife took notice. Uh-oh. Yeah, red flag, red flag. Now, side note, guys, if you're a guy, you're having a difficult time finding a lady, listen, you can just take this passage here. If you don't really believe or whatever, you're just listening because your auntie brought you or whatever. You're like, how can I find ladies at church? This is how to do it right here. Look, just be extremely hardworking, diligent, likable, respectable, humble, yet naturally confident, and be well-built and good-looking. There it is. Secret's out. But seriously, here's a case of another somebody who really isn't concerned about the other person's dream. They're not concerned about their conviction or the call on their life. They're just thinking, how can this person make me feel? Happens all the time, right? And here's my opportunity. Here's this person. Wow, wouldn't that be great? And so she comes on to him and tries to get him to, sleep with her, and he won't do it. And listen to what he says, because this is so insightful into what's going on in Joseph's head. He says, with me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. No one has more authority or standing. My master has withheld nothing from me except you because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? Let's get real for a second. Many men might have said something else in that moment. Many men might have said something else. Can we just be real? A lot of men might have taken that as some small little, dividend that they could receive for themselves for how crappy everything has gone. Wow. I worked hard to pick myself back up and put myself in a better position, and who would blame me? Who'd fault me for taking a little pleasure in this moment when I can, just capitalize on a little of that? I mean, maybe God owes me something. He gave me this dream, and now here's where it landed me, and nothing can't. How many men might have said something different? How many men might have said something like, how can we get away with it? That might have been their concern. How can we pull this off? I mean, here I am, I got all this position, I don't want to lose it, end up in jail, or worse, dead, or, sold to somebody else who's going to, just kill me over time. There's a lot of thinking men with less integrity who just say, I can't figure out how to pull it off. But in this moment, his eyes are locked on that favor of God. And he says, look at all of the things that have transpired. God set me up with this, and He's made this happen. He's protected me. It could have been worse. He's been here with me, and this man has been good to me, even though he bought me. He's been good. That's wrong. I can't betray him. I'd be betraying him, and in betraying him, I'd be betraying God. None of that is good. How could I do that? When your eyes are locked on the favor that you have been given, it does something to you. It does. When you lock on to those definite signs that you can remember and hold on to, God was with me then. Oh, yes, He was. He definitely was with me then. Oh, yes, I can't deny it. That was obvious. Even if it was small, it fuels your integrity. Because when it's obvious that God is with you, it's a lot harder to just pretend He's not there when opportunity comes. That's Joseph. Oh, and she tries. She tries again and again. Because after she's tried once, she's like locked in to keep trying until she's successful. That's just the way of it, right? And so she tries, and he avoids her. She tries again, he avoids her. It gets so bad, he just looks for any way he can not be around her whenever he's in the house. He sends himself somewhere else, gives him something else to do, and she tries and tries. And, long story short, she tries real hard one last time and grabs his clothes, basically, and won't let go. And he's like, no, I'm out of here. So runs out of there half naked. And of course, she can't take the insult of it. After that, it's just clear she's given up. Ladies don't persist forever, boys, okay? And so she gives up, and she just has to make up this story. Well, you know what? He tried to rape me, and I screamed, and then he ran out, and, what are you going to do about it, husband? And so Joseph goes to prison. When his master heard the story his wife told him, of course, Joseph didn't get asked. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. For most people, that would slay the dream. Let's be honest. He stood on his integrity, said the right thing, did the right thing. Maybe could have got away with it. Who cares? And where does it put him? Puts him in prison. But you have to keep reading. We're told that, but while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Round 2. Unfavorable position, just surrounded by signs of God's favor. Think about it. I'm not signing up to go to prison, okay? I'm not, and nobody I know is either. Nobody'd pick that. Nobody'd pick that to fulfill the dream. Most any dream, honestly, unless you're in prison ministry, okay, nobody's dream takes them to prison first. But it did. And here he is. Just obvious, undeniable signs of God's favor. This is a miracle. You don't go to prison and become in charge of the prison. It doesn't happen. He's not in a gang, okay? This isn't how it goes. This is a miracle. Most people go to prison, they sit on a dirt floor in those times and, hope that somebody outside cares about you enough to come and bring you food. Because then, they don't feed prisoners back then, you commit a crime, okay, we don't bless you with food, we just, this is somewhere you don't want to go. And so, yeah. Now, I'm going to give you your assignment right now, okay? I want you to read this chapter, 39, and chapter 40 for next week. And the reason I'm going to tell you that now is because as you read, it shapes up more and more, and you'll see that even though the direction of Joseph's life does not line up with the dream is coming to fruition, and it's coming to fruition faster than any other method you might have picked. It's kind of like saying, you know what, in your dream, let's say I was God, Mike, you're going to go to China one day, and you're going to be in charge of all these, foreign missionaries or something. And Mike's like, oh, okay. So Mike's waiting for a plane ticket. And you know what? I'm going to take you through the core of the earth. We're going to get there faster. That's kind of how it is. Here's Joseph, supposed to become responsible for all kinds of things, all kinds of authority, and he gets trucked straight to an official's house to be put in a prison with the same people that are put in prison by the Pharaoh, personally put in there by the Pharaoh for his political prisoners. He's going high places, he just doesn't see it yet. You have to stay focused on the unmistakable signs of God's favor in your life now. When you have the opportunity to be obedient to the gifts that God has given you, you got to use them and use them in the now. And if you're going to do that, you've got to stay locked on to the signs of God's favor. You've got to. How important is it to stay locked on to the favor that God has shown you, to practice gratitude, to say, thank God, that had to be God, no other way, that was God. And you would think that when things are going as badly as they appear to be going for Joseph, you know, whatever favor you're trying to conjure up that you can see that God did, you know, you'd have to think it's got to be at least as big, right? It's got to at least be so big that it cancels out all of the bad that's in front of me. It's got to cancel it all out or it just doesn't count, right? You know, maybe Joseph's in prison, you know, he's looking for signs of God's favor. The sign of God's favor I want is to spring me out of here and walk out, you know, Pharaoh himself or something. That would work. But the truth is, it's really in that moment not about the size of the favor, is it? It's not. You'd think so. But really, it's just more about knowing definitely that it was Him. When you're going through the rough stuff, yeah, you'd think, I just need the rough stuff to be over. Just strike it, vaporize it, then, you know, I'll be faithful again, I'll be filled, you know. But the truth is, in the hard stuff, you don't need to see it all just go away. But you definitely do need to see a sign that He is there, He is with you, He's paying attention, and He hasn't forgotten about you. And that's when those signs are so important. You have to lock onto those. You've got to. One time I was just, you know, I was being young and whatever. I said, you know what? I just graduated from college. I have a finance degree. I'm going to, good school too, lots of money spent, okay? I'm going to just whisk myself off. I'm going to move to Minneapolis because it's like the finance capital of the world, and I'm just going to get a job. I don't know what I'll get, but I'll get something when I get there. You know, I've found some place to live, and, you know, it's going to work out. And it didn't work out. Well, as soon as I moved there was a financial crisis that hit the fan, and it hit the fan like Minneapolis was like the starting point, right? So as soon as I get there, like all these banks start going under, right? And I'm looking for something, and I can't find, I mean, they aren't even holding job fairs anymore because it's a joke. And I found this one job fair in the Star Tribune, and I go, and I didn't even really think about it. It was the diversity job fair, you know, and I'm thinking, I'm diverse. Look at me, you know, I'm come from an agricultural background in rural America. You know, I bet you don't have one of those here. So that's what I did. Of course, whatever. But I honestly would have went anyway because I was so desperate to find a job. If you say job fair, I'm going to be there. And so I couldn't get anything, and finally I got this one connection through the guy I rented from, and he was starting to date this lady that managed a bank, and I'm like, okay, this could be good. So they set up an interview, and I go in there, and I mean, I thought it was an okay interview, and the ladies that were interviewing me were like inviting me out to do something with them after work. I'm like, I don't know if that's really I don't know, what is this? But I thought that's a good sign at least. And so and then I didn't hear anything from them for like ever. It was like 2 weeks, and I was calling, I wasn't getting them, and finally, like, oh yeah, the corporate put a hiring freeze on indefinitely for the foreseeable future. I'm like, I interviewed to be the bank teller. I just wanted a part-time job to be a teller. I just spent $135,000 like it's a prize, right? You know, I'm like, I should be able to do that. I'm like, no, nobody's hiring. Sorry. And I'm like, ah. And then I had this moment of conviction. I'm unemployed. I have all this time on my hands. And I'm really just kind of frittering it away and wasting it. Really, I'm just, I think about things and I go places. I try not to go too many places because it's expensive to drive, and I just had a couple of convictions. I should improve whatever skill set I have while I'm here. I got the time. I'll work on some music stuff. I'm trying to teach myself to play guitar, and I also just had this conviction from forever ago that I was supposed to do something to help people. And it involved Jesus, and it involved understanding the Bible. And so I got all this time, I'm going to start. I ought to study the Bible for real, get a course or something and go after it. And I found this church. I just pulled over to the side of the road one day. I was driving by Crossroads Church, went in. They're doing Alpha, about Alpha. And I thought, well, whatever, I'll do that. I'll meet people. And I just decided, even though I couldn't figure out why none of this was working out. At least if I was doing the thing I had conviction about, that maybe, God would meet me somewhere in there. And it's hard to do when you're just paying rent. You're not taking anything in. You start to get nervous. I better get out there and do something. I was delivering newspapers on the weekend. By the way, a car route job on the weekend in Minneapolis is not a very good job. It's 35 below some nights, and you have to get out of the car. So I start to, get linked up with this thing, and I'm like, I got to fill myself with something healthy, something good, something that could be used for Jesus someday. So I walked into this church, and they welcomed me and said, oh, this is, great, welcome, so, and this is so, and so, and this is so. And they're asking you all these questions, and you're like, I don't really want to tell them that I'm a transplant from out of state that moved here with no job, and I'm unemployed. That isn't really that much fun. But I told them anyway. Classic overshare. In the meantime, I had been just ambling around Target or someplace. I was looking for books with actual sheet music in, with tab, because I can learn tab. I'm already at tab. I can do that. And I just kept looking at this book. It was a really expensive, big, thick book, and it had all the songs in it I wanted. I'm like, if I just had that, I couldn't bring myself to buy it because it was $50 and 48 cents or something, And I'm just like, I can't justify that. I mean, I gotta buy gas for this monster, and I just no, that's frivolous, But I thought this would be so important to do. And so the second time I went back to this Alpha get-together at this church, some dude at just about the end hands me an envelope, and I'm like, what is this? I get in my car, and it's got money in it. It's just some bunch of people said, hey, we got together, just, we heard you're having you're not working, so we just thought, well, just ask for a little collection between us, and we'll just give it to you, and there you go. So hope you're not embarrassed or whatever. And I was, in a way, I'm like, I'm okay. I'm not broke. I was just thinking about it. And I get in the car, and it's $50.48. I'm like, it doesn't take much in that moment. I mean, to me, that was just a little, nope, still here. I'm watching you. It was exactly it, down to the penny with the tax. I mean, it was just what? No, you're trying to do the right thing. I'm here. You're not in charge, but I'm here. So pay attention. That was the beginning of an important season in my life of you know what? Okay. I can't control anything. But if I would just do the thing I believe God is calling me to do, He'll meet me there. If you're one of those people that was brave last week, You've had some things happen. Things have not shaped up the way that you would think they should. And to the point, you may even have just kind of like forgotten about that calling, forgotten about that dream. And if you remember, I asked you last week, if that was you, to begin to pray earnestly for God to fuel and recharge that dream this week, to put a little spark back into that thing, because it's not done. I know that was hard. If you genuinely did that, I know that was not an easy thing. And there was quite a few of you in this room stood up. You know what? And that was brave, by the way. I don't do that a lot. Have you noticed? I don't call people out to stand up and just show off the world that I got a little tension in my life and I don't know quite what to do. But that was brave. After you begin to pray, your next step, and keep praying, but your next step, you've got to come back to the favor in God's life, in your life that God's shown you. You've got to remember it. You've got to look for it again. It gets easy to forget about stuff as time goes on. But if you've honestly been pursuing and desiring and looking for where God's calling you to be, you have signs of God's favor in your life. It's just math. It's happened. It's continuing to happen. If that's your thing and you've been following it, trying, hungry, there are signs. And it may be painful to look for them, because it teaches you something about God, and that's that He's bigger than you and you can't quite understand everything that He intends to do or how. But you need that reassurance, friends. You need to come back. And you need to thank Him. And you need to take an inventory. I love, you know what holiday I love the best? I love New Year's. You think, you're supposed to love Easter and Christmas, Pastor James. We don't want you to be our pastor anymore. No, because you reflect. It's a time where you actually pause. It's okay to stay up late doing nothing important and just think about everything that has actually happened in a year. How often do you do that? Like never. You're busy. You go, I'm over here. The kids need a thing, and I got to get to work, and I got to pick up the thing, and I'm about 24/7. It's time to pause and reflect and take stock of what God has actually put in your life. What are you talking about, Pastor James? I'm talking about real, healthy, good things. Things that have reminded you that God loves you. Things that have reminded you that there is a calling on your life. Things that have confronted you about things that weren't right, that you're doing, that you're up to. Maybe it looked like a person that God plunked in your life out of nowhere. That had to have been God, that I met that person that day, that they wanted to talk to me, that they invited me over, that they blah, blah, blah. It could be a confrontation you had with a stranger. It could have been something that somebody gave to you, like a miracle of a provision of some kind. Well, we were doing this and things were hard, and then somebody came along and out of nowhere they gave me a car. Like I needed a car worse than anything, and there it was. I needed a friend worse than anything. There they were. Out of all of the garbage and mess, there was just this obvious sign, nope, still with you. Still with you. You tracking with me? Could have been a big win. Like Joseph, big win at work. No excuse or real reason for it. And there it is. I'm just having all of this success. I can't even claim it as my own. Could have been a rescue. Could have been money that showed up and you needed it real bad. It could have been so many things. And it didn't make all the hard go away, did it? But it was the relief that you needed at just the right time. Now, if you don't really care about what your calling is, you're kind of exempt. I mean, listen, maybe you'll find this offensive, I don't know, but you're already kind of doing your homework. Like if you're just like, I don't care if God's there or not, I don't care what he wants for me to do. Like you're already kind of doing what you need to do right now, which is just kind of follow the path of your own creation until you can't stand it anymore. That's, just kind of pretend that, there's no creator, you don't have a calling, you created yourself, and, you can name your own calling and just pursue that and pursue fulfillment through whatever your appetites drive you to do. That's honestly, I've done that. Everybody's done that. You have these appetites in your life, and I know what I would like, and I think that might work. I'll get fulfillment that way, and you chase after it. But at some point, you always come back when you realize that fulfilling your appetites doesn't actually lead to fulfillment. And then you come back. And then you go, God, okay, what do you have for me to do? I'll try that. Tried everything else. And maybe you've already done that. Maybe you've gone through that, and now you're in a place where you're saying, I just want to know. I want to know what God wants for me to do. I want more definition. I want some help here. And your first step in this moment is to just say, whatever it is that you call me to do, I accept. You don't have to tell me how it all works out. You don't have to tell me everything that's going to happen that might not feel good before it happens, but I accept. You don't have to make it go the way that I would do it exactly, but I accept. That's your challenge. In fact, that's the challenge of everybody in this room this morning, is simply to say, I accept. Not out of some strange, religious ritual obligation, but just because that's where you are in your heart, all afresh. And you could be following Jesus for a long, long time, and you could be doing very well right now on a mountaintop, and yet the challenge of every day is to say again, I accept. Whatever may come, I won't complain, as the song said, I accept. And this morning, as we do this little ordinance, this little ceremony called communion, really, your job is to sift through in your heart. If there's a calling on my life from God, do I still accept? Do I accept? We gather at the table of the Lord in celebration of the occasion when Jesus invited his disciples to share the Last Supper with him in the upper room. We read about it in Matthew 26, where it begins, on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, where do you want us to make preparations for you to eat the Passover? He gave them instructions to secure a special room where they would celebrate the Passover. While they were gathered with him and eating, Jesus took a piece of bread and after a prayer of thanks held it before sharing it with them and said, take and eat. This is my body. And then he took the cup, gave thanks, and offered it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until that day, when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. If you'd like, take the little tiny wafer out of the